very pleased to have with us Maria von Brincken, who is no stranger to Sudbury. In fact, I think about 20 years ago, we met on the tennis courts. And Maria's been very active in town, not only with her company, her landscape design company, but also trying to promote a Sudbury history trail. And we haven't given up on that. We're still hoping that eventually we will have a very lovely, beautifully designed history trail around Sudbury Center. She has chaired the Sudbury Design Review Board and is past president of the Sudbury Garden Club. She's the author, I mentioned about the history trail, and also no stranger to the Sudbury Historical Society, being a former trustee and secretary for the Sudbury Historical Society. I'm Ursula Lyons, co-president, by the way. I kind of forgot to say that. I feel as though the same people come every month, and sometimes it gets monotonous to introduce yourself, but I do see a few new faces here. Maria, as I mentioned, has a landscape design company in Sudbury, and she creates distinctive personal gardens for sun or shade. She creates garden spaces that feature compositions of color, texture, form, and bloom sequence woven through the landscape. Her master plan and garden borders are planned for four-season sequences of bloom, berry, and texture. Maria is a Radcliffe Seminars Landscape Design Project graduate, and she lectures, teaches courses, and leads symposia at garden clubs. The New England Flower Show, Massachusetts Horticultural Society, garden centers, and Radcliffe Seminars. She also writes a monthly newspaper garden column entitled Garden Notes. So as you can tell, we're really pleased to have Maria come to us today, and we hope you will be also.
Creation of an outdoor room or entry garden, that welcoming space where one finds flowering and bearing plants for all season. It's also a space that may hopefully provoke a smile or a sigh as one relinquishes the cares of the day. Coming into such a space, since that is beautiful and has textures, it becomes a place where you can go, as you wind your way to the front door, or a place that greets your family or your friends or visitors in the same way. It's literally an extension of your entry in your home. You consider an entry garden that way, as an outdoor room. Think of it as a place where one can inhale the fragrance of a flowering shrub, or something like a flowering magnolia in early spring. A place to feast your eyes upon a rose or an iris or something like that that's in bloom. A place to hear the birds sing. A place to discover leaf, form, and flower combinations that may delight you and cheer you up. As well as spots to linger, benches, swings, seats that beckon and ask you to rest a bit. And also ask you to invite your friends or family as they depart from, let's say, you're having a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner and they're on their way out the door. Well, it's a place where you can linger with the last conversations, or a place to greet and before you go into the house. So, with those thoughts in mind, we'll begin the slide lecture with some historic examples of these dooryard or old-fashioned or grandmother's gardens, and a few of the entry courtyard gardens I was able to find some slides of. Okay, so what we have here is a slide of, it's called Houses Fronting the New Milford Green, dated 1795. And I guess it's Ralph Earl's house or picture. I guess looking at this is a painting. Note the fence surround that I mentioned about. And it's also I mentioned the fence is keeping out cattle and things, but in this case, it's also keeping out the road It's telling people where the carriage can go and where the horses can't go, and inviting you in. There's a gate that lines up right with the front door here. There's also a gate that enters into this side garden. And this is also typical that the side garden, this grandmother garden, could be off to the side rather than in the front. Let's see, the caption was, in wealthy households like this in New Milford, the fenced flower garden was placed to the side or the back of the house and often included with a pergola, arbor, or other ornamental structure. So the pergolas and arbors that we're seeing in all the magazines and everything aren't a new item. And they aren't necessarily English. They date back to our American roots. I mean, we're talking 1795, which is, more than just a contemporary. This is Thomas Cole's house in 1868. And I believe this was painted by Charles Herbert Moore. As you can see, this is an informal entry garden, old-fashioned garden. Can you imagine walking down this lane and taking in the flowers and the colors and the forms in here, a little bit of shade and up here. And then you can see I guess these are either small children or very tiny adults, right? We've got a dog scampering here. I mean, gee, what more could you ask for? Except in front of your own house, right? Here, this slide shows, even in a more of a agrarian situation in a farm, where the road's running right up, you still have the fenced garden in here. So that even, country, city, it's a form that we'll see. This is the residence of Mrs. Cutting in Windham, I guess this is New Hampshire, in 1918. It says, even after 1900, conservative New England farmers maintained the enclosed front dooryard garden as a gesture of gentility on an otherwise utilitarian property. So you can see, you know how frugal New England farmers are. You can get a feeling for how important this garden was, because they weren't going to spare any effort in something that wasn't important. Here we have a section of William Cullen Bryant's garden in Cedar Mere, Long Island. He's an author, and like Longfellow, was much revered, whose house and garden became a shrine. I don't know if you've been to the Longfellow house in Cambridge. You might visit that place in its gardens, in its fenced gardens. But mementos in forms of plantings, cuttings, or seeds of such a visit were cherished. So in other words, people would wander into this garden, which is a little more formal than the ones I've just shown you. These are these parterre hedges with flowers and different things in between. But this wonderful flowering tree, and they might pluck a seed from something or a flower, and as a memento and press it, or take the seeds and grow something in their own garden, and then later say, this is a seed that I gathered at my visit to Bryant's garden or Longfellow's garden, and it was a great way. As in today, the long cherished traditions of getting cuttings or seeds from your mother's or your friend's gardens, and then they get incorporated into your own, so that these kinds of gardens become a place of memory. They remind you of a favorite friend, a wonderful time that you had, a particular time growing up in childhood. So you get a sense that these gardens are about multiple layers. They're more than inviting entry spaces. They're also places that you hold and remember cherished dreams. Isn't that lovely? This is what I call the picturesque ideal. And this is from a painting that Abbott Fuller Graves did of Grandmother's Doorway, circa 1900. Look at how the colors are keyed into the front door here. Now, the section of slides that you've just seen are all from the book Grandmother's Garden, The Old-Fashioned American Garden, 1865 to 1915 by May Broadley Hill. It's a book I heartily recommend to anyone who's interested in this subject. lots more beautiful paintings and things. Now, there was another trend beginning about this time. Over in England, the English romantic park was coming into being. Of course, in America, it started to show up too, but we didn't use the ha-ha, which in England, it's essentially a deep trench that kept the cattle from coming to your front door and eating the flowers. We kept the fences. And in this slide, wait a second, let me just make sure I didn't skip a slide. All right. This slide is starting to show that movement here. I mean, you have a long driveway, and in between you have these open greens area with clumps of trees. And that was part of this English romantic movement with the likes of Reptons and Humphrey Brown and different people like that. But the thing is, if this is the home, then this is the entry court. And it's a form that can still be used today in driveways where often you end up coming, and if this was a side, going straight to the garage. And of course, not everybody has as much land, but this kind of idea can be employed. Here, this is a Beatrice Farrand plan. And what I wanted to show you, I think you can see it up here, is even here, what we have here is this is the landing, right? There's a wide landing that allows you to open the front door, not fall off, or if 2 or 3 people are coming in and out, you don't have to play games with the screen or the door. So there's plenty of room here. There's a few steps. Here's the rest of it here. And this section in here is this courtyard that allows cars or carriages. But notice here, there aren't any foundation plantings. There's some trees in this area. But yet at the same time, and of course I should mention that this romantic park gardens from the English is the 1850s. This is a superintendent's cottage for one of the colleges that Beatrice Farrand designed. And I just wanted to show you, here we have, there's some lawn in here, but you still have the fence and vines, and you have the vines and what they call wall mountings, where you may have a shrub that has grown like a vine. But again, not any foundation plantings. And of course here they show some small, it could be standard roses, it could be trees that are going to come and arch over. But again, it's a different form and something that could be useful in our own gardens. And this bunch of slides came from Beatrice Farrand's American Landscapes, Her Gardens and Campuses, by Blamaury, McGuire, and McPeck. Now this slide was Thomas Hancock's stone house, and it was built in 1737. And this is a terraced front garden in Beacon Hill, Boston. This photograph was taken about 1860, which is actually the decline of this house and garden. So we're not seeing in its heyday, because it turns out the place was demolished a few years later in 1863. But note, here again, we have this space, this enclosed space. It's an outdoor room, if you want to think of it that way, with walls and a ceiling that's created by this tree, brings the canopy of the sky down. The fence, again, with the gate, so the enclosed garden, and of course the path and the textures of the plants create the floor. And you might also say that there are windows looking out, because from this front facade, I mean, you've almost got a bit of a window framed here and here between the space of the trunk of the tree and this shrub. So indeed, it is an outdoor room. Now here's an entry court example. Now you notice there aren't any fences here. There may be one out by the road in this situation. We've got the drive coming around, and then the utility drives, which in modern days would go to a garage, or here it goes off to a carriage house. And I just pointed here. This may not be a carriage house. The door looks too narrow. This is probably some kind of guest house or some other exterior building. But look what's happening. What these shrubs are, forming this small garden walk area here, are boxwood. And so what you see now are these, they're not connected, but imagine them all connected to create a line. So they line the driveway the same way and line against the house. This is called the Lilacs in Medford, Massachusetts. It's the residence of Thomas Kidder. And it was this circular front garden, which is this area here, was laid out between 1808 and 1812. Please note that beside the house is a weeping willow, which I guess is with this. And of course, it looks like from this painting it's going to really envelop the house, right? Maybe it should be way over here, but the weeping willow was a tree that had very many romantic associations in the 19th century. So people were planting plants that meant something, and the same can be held today. Besides the personal momentum, here's an example of an entry drive in court from Roseland Cottage in Woodstock, Connecticut. It says, from a tree-shaded entrance drive, 1860s. Think about what Sudbury might have been like in the 1860s. In the 1860s, of course, this is getting onto Civil War year, probably the Underground Railroad starting to be active in town. We've got the carts, the horses drawing candy up Candy Hill Lane from the minister that is at First Parish and is also, since he's part-time, he preaches at a couple of other parishes around. And in Sudbury, you wouldn't be finding something quite this formal, because it's primarily an agricultural town. But some of these other gardens you might well be finding. And if you think about, let's see, if we go back just a second. In Sudbury, you might be finding something like this. For all we know, in front of Florence Hosmer's house, they had something like that. A garden like this might have been, even though it seems a little formal, but it may well have been in Concord, if not in Sudbury. A situation like this could well have been. In fact, there was probably a lot of them like this. So it's not too far from where we live today, and a lot of the old houses, they've just lost these fences. Here's the same garden, the Roseland Cottage, but now you can see the full extent of this entry garden. It is more formal in the sense it's laid out like a parterre, and even here, these boxwood hedges aren't connected yet. But look at all the masses of flowers in here. That'd be kind of fun to come through, wouldn't it? You're waiting at you've come a long drive, you've come out of your carriage, and you walk through the garden as a way of getting reacquainted with your guests or your family, and get the kinks out of your back too, probably, right? This is called this Pink Gothic Revival Cottage, and there's this is a plan of it that shows the way the drive comes around. And here again, there's a sense of an entry court, and then this garden where you can wander around. Smell the flowers, have great conversations. Another picture of the same garden. But here now you can see what happens when these boxwood hedges are connected, right? And there's evidently a note here that there's a bowling alley off to the left. So think about putting a bowling alley in today. Okay. Here's one. This is J.S. Potter's homestead in 1867. By the way, the parterre garden at the Roseland was 1890s. This is 1867. And what they have here is a whole bevy of gardeners attending to this space, and the people are on the porch enjoying the fine day. But I want you to note here, they've had some fun with these hedges. Obviously, I think you get a feeling here. This looks like a big chicken head, doesn't it? And who knows what these are going to be? I mean, I get the feeling of Alice in Wonderland here. I expect the cards up on these as cards that are painted different colors out, painting the. This is probably a viburnum or something like that, but painting them the right color for the queen. So gardens can evoke those kinds of fantasies too. And again, I wanted to note there's not any foundation plants here. Okay, now we're going to move into a different section. This I call the present day examples and variations on the dooryard gardens for antique reproduction or contemporary New England homes. Okay, traditional fenced dooryard gardens, they all evolve. The different elements of the traditions recombine with the romantic English country park school of Brown, Kent, and Repton to create dooryard gardens that are still charming and use flowering shrubs, trees, perennials, herbs, and vines. As you can see here, this is a very charming contemporary garden. It happens to be in Cambridge. I took this picture in Cambridge last year. But doesn't that welcome you? Wouldn't you like to go and wander in there and meet whoever lives in that house? Here again, and you notice there's a bit of grass in here, but the use of vines on the house, and of course the picket fence, which is kind of a clue to the old-fashioned garden. This one's a variation of the theme of, here we have the fence, it's a fenced-in yard, but we have the grass, the open grass, which again comes from that English tradition. And also in our modern day world, it gives a place for the kids to play soccer or baseball, or in this case, it looks like badminton. So you have a badminton game in the front yard, but at the same time, you have this whimsical path that leads up to the front door. And notice that while there's a combination of plants and things like that, they're not all lined up willy-nilly, the same 4 plants that you see in practically everybody's sterile suburban garden. What is it, a yew, a rhododendron? We all know the same plants because everybody's houses look the same. Well, here with this concept of old-fashioned gardens, you bring in flowering shrubs, flowering trees, vines, you bring in herbs, you bring in annuals, you bring in all these things that are delight, texture, fragrance, and contribute to a sensation of welcome and beauty, and things that bloom throughout the summer and in the spring with flowering bulbs and winter interest. I mean, here we've got one dwarf Alberta spruce that contributes to that. It's never going to be huge and covering up these windows, so you get to see the house. There's a lovely architecture in that house. It's nice to be able to see it. Here's a garden, again, while it's a small Cambridge garden, the idea of this can be transferred to anybody's yard. In this case, they have a shade tree that's going to get tall and provide shade and allow visibility from this front porch. But again, look at how nice the combination of a casual garden here. Another view of the same garden. But imagine the bouquets you can pick, bring the outside in. Here's one on a tight corner. This is up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. But again, the house is very visible. And this great way entering up to with the roses climbing up. And there's a fence here, but it's being covered by a vine that will flower at some point. Isn't that a charming way to do a corner rather than just asphalt and more asphalt and yews? And look at this one. They've come up, there's obviously a few steps here. There's a change in elevation and grade, and you come into this kind of almost landing here, which is actually the room shape that you're in. And you have a choice to meander by the side path or take in the flowers, different flowering shrubs and things before you come in the front door. Another variation, this brick wall, excuse me, that's not brick. This fieldstone wall becomes visible in winter. Now here's some yews, but these yews are very small and kept in place here, and they're not here in front of the windows blocking out all the light and obscuring the shape of the house. So I mean, there's a place for yews in these entry gardens, but just not within 2 inches of the house where they're going to overwhelm the architecture and anybody doing any maintenance or anything. Here's another variation. This is still the idea of, it's a kind of a modern variation of the grandmother's garden in the sense that, you have this outdoor room that's established, and look what they did here. They actually put stone on the side of the garage, which really lends a different air. It's kind of an interesting idea. It changes the feeling of this courtyard kind of entry. And there's a bit of a wall here that suggests this area here, which is like in the old examples I showed you, where the garden would be to the side. And yet here we have these low plantings that are flower leading you up, and you have a bit of the lawn, and you can see the shade trees over here, which is again part of that English Romantic movement. Here we've got a huge tree in the front. Again, there isn't any fence, but the plants create the same idea. This border does the same thing in many respects, spatially at least, as those white picket fences. It outlines the space in here. You can almost feel it, can't you, where this lawn is. As you walk in here, the vegetation, again, you look out over it, but it's creating a space. When you have a lawn that goes from the street to the front door, what you do essentially is that you give that entire space to the street. It's like you pay taxes on it, but everybody else owns it, because there's no place that stops your eye. When you have whether a border or a picket fence or a hedge or a stone wall, you stop the eye and you create a space that makes you want to go out and actually spend some time there when you create a garden like that. So you actually get full use of all your property, which is pretty exciting when you think about that. Not just a place you go out and mow or pay to have someone else mow, but you actually enjoy it. Here's a garden. This one's actually right in Sudbury. You can tell the path comes in here and around to the front. Part of the path goes to the side. This is a side door entry. And you have this wonderful perennial garden. This was taken during a garden tour, so you have everybody lined up, but you have a wonderful sense of, in this garden. Another Sudbury garden. This is a little different take on what I was talking about, in that we have the fence out here, and a large part of this garden is on the outside of the fence. It's also on the inside, but as you approach, you have this, from one end, you have this wonderful tree and this large grass expanse. And here again, I mean, aren't you invited to come up through this flowering arbor to the front door? The person who owns this has spent a lot of time. When they bought the place, it was all covered up, and they've actually reclaimed this. They've created this space here and this wonderful flowering. It's Peggy Burke's on Water Row, if anybody drives by there. Here again, this is a fragment from Kevin Doyle's entry garden. As you walk on this one, you have a sense it's rather narrow going up, but still, feast your eyes on the different compositions of different kinds of plants. Wouldn't it be an adventure to go up to that front door, or to go out to get your mail or newspaper? Think about what you might see every day. Something new is happening every day. Again, more gardens that reflect this idea. Here's a shady garden, so you can have shade gardens that work this way too. This is also in Sudbury. Here's an entry garden with showing the its spring finery with the early bulbs, and look at how containers work in with that. And again, the wide steps, and here we've got pansies welcoming the spring. In this garden, there's a large island garden that creates a boundary from the street, and then behind it there's another space and other gardens. And this is late summer, so it just keeps going. Here's one with an herb garden. Here's another Sudbury garden with this wonderful, fanciful bell as a sculpture, so you can show your personality and your interests that way. This one I thought was rather unusual. This was down on the Cape somewhere. You come in, of course the car parks here, but you're beckoned in through this rose hedge and this extraordinary view of the ocean, and then you enter in the front door. And of course it's framed here, so it says, come right this way, check out the ocean, and then come inside. And another Cambridge garden, but again it could be applied to anybody's, where you're using a hedge, and of course I would like to see a shrub that was a bit smaller than this, but it's still not overwhelming the door, so it really works out. This is a before spot, and there an herb garden with a container after, an antique house in Concord. Here's a planted and just a side garden. Again, it's simple, but it's still adding to that entry space. Color all the time. Wanted to show you more entry courts. I mean, this is a really good example. You come down a long drive and you circle through here, and using pachysandra here, and it's rather formal in the sense of the way that the yews are kept down away from there, but it works rather well. And this area is being redone so that it's not quite so tall, and it'll be filled with flowering plants. But you get a sense of how an entry court can work. Here's another Sudbury example of an old home with an entry court that's gravel and the fence. And this garden was just put in, so the plants haven't come up, but there's a hedge here that continues the line of this fence, these wonderful old granite posts that let you know that this is the front door. As with many homes, sometimes there's a confusion. Do you go to the side door or the front door? In this design, it's very obvious that there's the front door, but if you want to go to the side or you're going to put away the groceries, it's easy to get there. There are daylilies that will be in continuous bloom in front of that, and there's a line of peonies that continue that look, plus the planters, four-season planters. I wanted to show you what a plan might look like. Again, here, this is I guess this home is maybe late 1700s, early 1800s. And typically you'd have a walk that will from the street straight up to the house. But because of over the years in this old farmer's house, there's this wonderful sweep of Norway spruce that's mature. They're about 100 feet tall and they're gorgeous. And also because it's now a very busy street, we opted to design from the side. And there was an existing walkway that was crumbling that went straight, I think it was about here, and went to the front door. So you were literally crushed against the house. And the modern driveway was put in, which we kept. But here you have these perennials on both sides so that you feel like you're walking through a garden or driving through. Shrubs that are used to screen this back area. And I'll just show you a few slides here of what that looks like. rather than use a fence, which in this case, a gate and a fence would diminish the space because it comes off to the side here, we pulled the idea of the arbor and just suggesting, by using the arbor, just suggesting that there's a white picket fence. There was an ugly old fence there, and I put lattice up and also enclosed the porch area with lattice. And used this wonderful piece of granite that was stuck over here and moved it as the entryway for the walkway that comes up. But here again, you get this is the first year it was planted, so the flowers, are pretty dense, but they're not like like what they would look like. There's enough that shows, but right now this year, the roses are up over this, and they were really magnificent in the spring. And the boxwood that surrounds this are taller and more connected. But traditional plants, lavender, salvia, roses. This was the rose that was actually there, didn't want to disturb it. Came from the old farmstead. Clematis. And again, this is a grandmother's garden. I call this a revival garden, a colonial revival garden, in the sense that it's not a restoration, but the plants that I chose are plants that I have lists of plants and what plants would have been grown in what era. So they're actually modern day hybrids or modern day equivalents of plants that would have been found in such a garden in the 1800s, for instance. But they're the easy care or more bloom variety, or things that are easily accessible. When you're doing a restoration garden, there's often not enough information to restore something exactly. Plus the plants are often very difficult to find. So just more slides of how delightful it is to be in a grandmother's garden, and how it can be transformed for an old house, or even a contemporary home can use this kind of garden. And note things like lighting, where to light the step, but it's something that disappears. And while these urns are Victorian, because any garden comes, or it's like any house, goes through all the different periods, you can have that's what's also nice about a revival garden rather than a restoration garden, is that in a revival garden you can have an element like 2 Victorian urns and still be truthful to the spirit of the place, to the revival, because you get the feel that you've walked into a garden that's been continuously kept for the last 100+ years. We keep it a secret now that it's grown in, that it's only a few years old. This is looking across the driveway. And this is to show you what happens in winter. In this garden, there's box on either side of these pedestals, and I used antique old granite curbstone to make it feel old, and work with the fact that and use old granite up here for the stone for the front step. But there's winter interest in the sense these urns have the composition of winter greens that last right through now, and things like this is a blue oak grass, which is still, the form persists through winter. The sedum heads persist even in the snow. If you can imagine this covered in snow, you'd still have the shapes of things, and you'd have the seed heads showing. And just a detail here of this winter one. So that is what I have to show you for today. And I would hope that you might be inspired in your own gardens to think about creating a garden that is an outdoor room, an extension of your entry hallway, your living room, a garden where you can greet people, a garden where you can linger, a garden where, as you go to get the newspaper or the mail during the day. You might have a bench where you can sit and take a few minutes to listen to the birds, smell the flowers, all those things that really add to the quality of life. That's why I think these dooryard gardens are so important to us, because I think they add to the quality of our life, and they also beautify our homes. So how can you lose, right? Thank you very much for having me today.